Thank you.
To each and every one of you.
For helping our great nation
find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Across England, Scotland,
Wales and Northern Ireland. On TV.
on radio and online.
We're proud to be
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flop at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me! And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Good morning. This is To The Point on GB News with Bev Turner and myself, Mercy Moroki. We're on your TV, radio and online.
Good morning. It is lovely to be back. Now, it's a big day for Liz Truss and for all of us because we're going to find out in the next few hours what Liz is going to do to help you pay your extortionate energy bills. She's got a 150 billion quid package and we're going to find out how much of it you will get.
Yes, we will, and we'll be bringing you her statement live from Parliament later on in the show. You won't want to miss that. And we'd also like to hear from you this morning. How are you feeling ahead of that announcement? What do you want to hear from the Prime Minister? Get in touch, let us know. GBViews at gbnews.uk. That's all after these headlines.
Good morning. It's 10 o'clock. I'm Alice Porter in the GB newsroom. Liz Truss says she will deal hands-on with the energy crisis as she sets out her plans later today to help households and businesses with soaring energy bills. The newly appointed Prime Minister is expected to announce that domestic bills will be frozen at around £2,500. There are also reports that she could also lift the ban on fracking. But Labour has accused the PM of writing a blank cheque to the energy giants by ruling out a windfall tax on the profits. Levelling Up Secretary Simon Clarke says the government wants to give more certainty to households amidst the energy crisis.
What we're aiming to do today is to provide clarity and comfort for people and for businesses that their bills won't go to unmanageable levels during the course of the winter and spring that lie ahead, and that we really do tackle this problem at source rather than go through a series of sort of piecemeal solutions offering a bit more money at a time. This is an attempt to address the costs in a way which provides predictability and certainty, and which will allay the concerns, I think, of so many people that they're going to face an unmanageable pressure.
The number of people in England waiting to start routine hospital treatment has risen to a record high. NHS England says 6.8 million people were waiting to start treatment at the end of July. That's an increase of 100,000 since June. It comes after health leaders wrote to the new Prime Minister, warning that the NHS will face extreme pressure in the weeks to come and that urgent action was needed to address the pressure felt by frontline services. Workers at Royal Mail are walking out today in a further strikes in a dispute over pay and conditions. It comes as staff in the Communication Workers Union are already set to walk out for 2 days, starting from today. They will now also strike for 48 hours on September the 30th and October the 1st. David Ward is General Secretary of the CWU and accuses Royal Mail of looking to sell off the company.
The company are involved in talks behind our backs, behind the backs of the public, to hand over Royal Mail to an equity investment offshore company based in Luxembourg. The government are aware of that. They've called that company in for a due diligence test, so it's making it very difficult for us to actually know what is really going on.
The suspect in a stabbing in Canada that left 10 people dead and 18 others injured has died after he was captured by police. Miles Sanderson was taken into custody on Wednesday afternoon after a high-speed chase. Shortly after his arrest, police say he went into medical distress and was taken to hospital in Saskatoon, where he was pronounced dead. A medicine for menopausal women is to be sold over the counter without the need for prescription for the first time in the UK. Boots launched the hormone product today, with more stores set to offer it by the end of October. It will be available for women aged 50 and over who have not had a period in at least a year. It was revealed this year that a shortage of hormone replacement therapy medication left some women sharing prescriptions and others feeling suicidal. Artificial sweeteners used as a sugar replacement in a wide range of food and drink has been linked to an increased risk of heart disease. Researchers in France say that food additives should not be considered a healthy and safe alternative to sugar. They also found that artificial sweetener consumption was linked to a 9% higher risk of heart disease. Australian tennis player Nick Kyrgios has received the biggest fine of any other player at the US Open this year after destroying 2 rackets during his quarter-final loss yesterday, as well as spitting and swearing. The 27-year-old has been ordered to pay around £12,000, taking his total fines for the tournament to £28,000. Prince George, Princess Charlotte and Prince Louis have all attended their first day at school. The siblings were accompanied by their parents, the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge, for a settling-in session at Lambrook Private School near Ascot. This is GB News. We'll bring you more news as it happens. Now it's back to the point.
Well, good morning. This is To The Point on GB News with me, Mercy Muroki, and Bev Turner. We're on your TV, radio and online, and it's a big day in politics today. So here's what's coming up on our show.
The Prime Minister will set out her long-awaited plan to tackle the energy crisis this morning. Millions of households are expected to see their energy bills capped at around £2,500 a year, but at a cost to the taxpayer of £150 billion. We're going to be bringing you her statement live on GB News in just a little while.
Yes, and we're hearing from regular people across the country about how they're struggling at the moment and what they want to hear from Liz Truss when she takes the stand in Parliament a bit later on. From those in the welfare system to small business owners, we're going to be talking to them all, so stay tuned for that as well.
And Prince George, Prince Louis and Princess Charlotte have all started school today, becoming pupils at Lambrook in Berkshire. I like to think Kate dropped them off and then went home to put a wash on and read Hello Magazine with a coffee. We're going to have you the latest from Windsor as the Cambridges continue their new lives away from London. Lucky them.
Yes, well, that's all coming up and much more across the programme. And you can get in touch with your views, as usual, gbviews@gbnews.uk. In particular, let us know how you're feeling this morning ahead of that announcement from Liz Truss later on in Parliament, because, of course, this is very long awaited and we are finally getting that help. So gbviews@gbnews.uk.
So, as we just said, this morning, while we are on air, the Prime Minister will today, I don't think she necessarily timed it to be on our show. I made it sound like that. She's going to lay out her plan to tackle the country's ridiculous energy bills. We have just heard that the cars are pulling up to Downing Street. She will get in them. She'll go to the House of Commons and then she will say, now, for everyone watching GB News, this is what I'm going to do.
Yes, absolutely. She will name check us too.
I think so. I like to think so.
Well, as part of the scheme, millions of households will see their energy bills capped at around £2,500 a year, with a freeze paid for through borrowing.
That's right, huge borrowing, which will, of course, have to be paid back one day, remember? So our business and economics editor, Liam Halligan, is going to break down for us in just a moment what Liz Truss could announce. There is the door.
Yes, we were just seeing live images there of Liz, of Downing Street, the Downing Street door. So has she actually left? Do we know whether she's left yet, or have the cars just pulled products. So we are waiting for her to leave. I feel
like I've spent a lot of time at home recently, Mercy, watching this
Staring
door.
at a black door.
Because, of course, I was on here with you quite a lot in the last couple of months, building up to the big announcement. Was it going to be Liz Truss? Was it going to be Rishi Sunak? And then I was on holiday. I felt like coming in and going, have I missed anything? What's been happening while I've been gone?
Well, new Prime Minister, £150 billion, not much really. This is completely irrelevant, but I'm getting the keys to my new house tomorrow, and my door looks just like that, just with a zero missing. It just has a 1 on the end, so I'm going to be looking at many black doors a day. But back to what matters, which is that Liz Truss will today announce a £150 billion package to freeze energy bills for up to 2 years. And she's also apparently going to announce that she's going to end the ban on fracking and give the go-ahead for drilling to go ahead for oil and gas drilling in the North Sea. So it's going to be a huge package. We hear it's going to be for households and businesses as well. So lots of businesses are going to be eagerly awaiting what she has to say.
Yeah, and I've kind of got so many questions about this because I can't help but feel, and we're going to have several experts on this morning which will help answer my questions and our questions, which may not be that intelligent, but I think it's as somebody who has enormous bills at the moment. I even tried to change my supplier this week and I wasn't allowed to do that. I'm hoping that our experts will help us all understand this in more detail. But my concern is it feels a little bit short-termist again. Let's make myself popular as the new Prime Minister. Let's give you this massive package to all, help you all out. But then what? Because there will be consequences.
I think the big question is, though, I mean, lots of people are agreeing it's not a great idea. Lots of people saying it's a terrible idea. We'll be speaking to one of those later, but it's kind of what is the alternative when people need immediate help. But as we mentioned, our business and economics editor, Liam Halligan, is breaking down for us what Liz Truss could announce later on.
Prime Minister Liz Truss knows that she needs to tackle the UK's energy crisis as her very first priority. Household fuel bills are soaring, given that rising off-gem energy price cap. And UK businesses benefit from no price cap protection whatsoever, so they're facing even sharper price spikes. Last autumn, the off-gem energy regulator capped the energy bills for a typical family at £1,277. That cap rose sharply to almost £2,000 in April this year as wholesale gas prices soared, with gas used to generate electricity, of course. And we've recently learned that from October, household bills are set to rise above £3,500 a year, almost a threefold rise in less than 12 months. As well as households, the new government needs to consider the impact of this energy price crisis on firms. Across Britain, all kinds of companies, from pubs, shops and restaurants to steel makers and manufacturers, they're seeing their energy bills spiral, even more than households. That's because that off-gem energy price cap doesn't apply to firms, tens of thousands of which across the country are now at risk of bankruptcy. So what is this new government energy support package going to look like? Now, Rishi Sunak, when he was Chancellor, he announced a £400 grant to help all households. On top of that, more vulnerable families, those on certain benefits, they're due to receive an additional £650 a year. But these policies were set when wholesale prices were much lower. So it now looks like we need even bolder measures. Truss and her team are now expected to freeze energy prices for 2 years at April 2022 levels, scrapping that recently announced October off-gem price cap altogether. And that's likely to cost the government around £100 billion. That's more than furlough. At a stroke, it doubles government borrowing this year. The reality is that this huge bill could soar even more. As the war in Ukraine drags on, those wholesale energy prices, they remain high and extremely volatile, not least with Russia restricting supplies of gas to Western Europe. One reason this energy support package is so expensive is that ministers have now indicated there will be assistance announced for businesses as well as households. To me, that makes total sense, because if countless businesses fold, we could have a jobs crisis too. But the cost that Liz Truss is going to announce is going to be sky high, and there's concern financial markets could rebel as the government tries to borrow much more. So this energy package is risky. Can the UK afford to do it? Or can we afford not to?
Well, that's the question. Can we afford not to, isn't it? And as we say, we will be bringing you Liz Truss making that statement a bit later on in our show. So watch out for that. We will let you know when we're expecting that. But joining us now is the economist and writer, Sam Ashworth-Hayes. Thank you for joining us, Sam. Let's start off with talking about a piece you've written in The Spectator a couple of days ago, which was quite scathing of these energy plans Liz Truss is set to announce. You think it's actually going to sort of drive up demand when there's not a lot of supply, and it's going to make blackouts more likely. Can you just elaborate that for us?
Yeah, absolutely. So the core issue here is not the fact that prices have gone up per se, because that's a symptom of an underlying problem, which is that Russian gas is no longer flowing into Europe, which means there's now a limited supply across the continent, which means that when we want to import energy, we're now competing in a market with not just energy available to other consumers. So we're competing with the Germans, we're competing with sort of other nations who are buying Norwegian gas, buying French electricity. And that means prices go up, because prices do is when supply is low and demand is high, they go up until demand is sufficiently low that the two are matched together. And this is particularly important in electricity markets, because if you don't have sufficient energy to go around, that's how you get blackouts. What the government is doing with this program is basically saying, we will fix the price much, much lower than the market price, and you will be able to buy as much as you want of that quantity, and we'll subsidise the difference. So they're basically committing to being the marginal consumer of energy in Europe for an extended period. But under any circumstance where they can't actually buy the energy that they would need to meet the massively boosted demand, you end up with blackouts. So it seems like a very, very bad idea.
You're absolutely right, I think, Sam, is that it seems to be a policy which completely neglects to factor in human behaviour. Because at the moment, we are all, I think it's fair to say, being more careful, are we not? Because there isn't an awful lot of supply. So we're all being careful. And no, we're not being careful because there's not supply. We're being careful because we don't want to pay massive bills, and there's a difference. So I think what you're saying is, if we all feel, well, we're going to have a cap of £2,500, let's stick all our heating on high, let's have big baths of water. That's what human beings are, that's what we're going to do. Is that's what you're saying, effectively?
Yeah, basically, when prices are higher, you use less, and prices are lower, you use more. So when you set an artificially low price, people naturally use more. And that's exactly what we don't want to happen this winter. And the thing is, just to briefly note as well, the price cap is a slightly misleading phrase, because it only applies to the price of the individual unit of electricity you have. So if you have a big house, you can pay much, much more than $2,500. And I think some people might get caught out by that at some point. But one of the things to sort of say here is, this is not a case for giving people no support, but the way they've chosen to do this is absolutely dreadful, because we want those price signals to tell people to use less. The price goes up, people use less, they find other ways of keeping warm, they substitute between different things. That's what we want to happen. What they're basically doing is destroying that incentive, or significantly diminishing that incentive, and they're doing so in a way which gives equal support to all households across the country, which is quite regressive. And there was room here to spend a lot of money on targeted support for the vulnerable, for the elderly, for the low income, even for the lower middle income. That would have cost substantially less than 130 billion. I wouldn't sort of have ruined the price incentive in this way.
Yeah, I mean, I see what you're saying, and we did actually touch on this yesterday with our business and economics editor, Liam Halligan, who said, well, actually, then there's not going to be this huge rise in demand because, $2,500 is still sort of double what people were paying this time last year. So already the fact it's even going to be $2,500 is enough of an incentive to not use it. So there is that argument as well. So just talk to us a bit then about, what other alternative... Liz Truss is going to do this. We're expecting her to make the statement. But what other alternatives could she have considered then? Because you say sort of means testing and giving money to the lowest earners, for example. But how would she be able to do that in a short space of time?
So it's actually a really interesting point you mentioned here, which is that the government seems to be increasingly constrained by sort of having quite a clunky benefit system. So in the longer term, that's something they should probably look at fixing. But, at a very basic step, you could have had a look at sort of mean-tested benefits for pensioners. You could have put a boost onto universal credit. You could have looked at sort of putting a boost onto disability credits, and you probably would have hit sort of the majority of the lower income and sort of more vulnerable people with those policies. whether it be absolutely beyond the wits of the Treasury to find a way of sort of doling out some extra cash to middle-income families, beyond that seems to be, I mean, to me, it seems like you probably could have found some way of doing that in the next 3 months. But I mean, the problem is basically is what the ideal policy solution here is to give people money, let them spend it as they will, and make sure that they don't have sort of incentive to spend more. Because Liam is completely correct. Prices are going up substantially, so expect people to use less than they did last winter. The problem is that the supply is going to be going down even more substantially. There is no Russian gas currently flowing into Europe through the Nord Stream 1 pipeline, at least, which means there is now substantially more demand for the Norwegian gas, which we buy from the Germans. So it's not so much a problem that the price has gone up a bit, it's that supply has gone down substantially more, so price would need to rise even further to match supply to demand.
The other thing that struck me, Sam, and you said this in your brilliant article in The Spectator, I would urge anybody to go and have a look at it, because I think you set it out so clearly and so in such commonsensical terms when so much of this feels quite complicated, is that you're also taking away the incentives at the moment for people who might want to insulate their houses. They might want to get air source heat pumps or solar panels, all of the things that we should probably be doing. There may not be the urgency that some people would tell you that there is, but for the longer term planning, we should all be doing that. And suddenly, if we take away these very high bills, and I agree with you very much in terms of the people who need the support should get them, but we're taking away some of that incentive, aren't we, to change the way we live and the way we live within our particular individual houses.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's kind of worth mentioning as well that we still expect energy prices to be quite high throughout the next year, and for a continued period afterwards, actually. So there is going to come a point at which the government's going to look at this and say, well, are we just going to subsidise demand until gas comes back on from Russia, or until we completely replace it with our energy system, which could be an extended period? Or are we going to sort of leave people facing this sudden hike in prices at some point? And if it's a sudden hike in prices, well, then we're going to have a conversation in a year's time or from now, where people are saying, gosh, I really wish I put this installation in last year. I really wish I bought this heat pump last year. So as you say, it's like you're basically paying people not to adapt to the new energy reality, which is an insane policy. If you were just giving them cash and sort of leaving prices high, they could spend that money on insulating the house. They could spend that money, on basically any number of things in their consumption sort of baskets, which they view as sort of being better valued energy. But instead, we're saying we'll give you lots of money, but only if you spend it on energy, and only if you spend it on energy when there isn't much to go around. And sort of when you frame it in those terms, I think it really becomes clear what a bizarre policy this is for a supposedly free market prime minister to implement.
Well, there's no doubt that when she unveils those plans later, there will be lots of critics picking apart her plans piece by piece. Thank you for explaining all of that to us very clearly, Sam. Thank you, economist and writer Sam Ashworth-Hayes there.
What he also says in his article is that if he follows this, what's so great about Sam's perspective is he takes it through step, and where we go at the end. And he says at that point, when we've got increased demand because people aren't being careful with their bills, we've got less supply, we're going to get energy blackouts, and then we're going to have energy lockdowns. So then we have green lockdowns. Sorry, you can't leave your house because we're not allowed to turn the heater.
I don't think it all comes down to lockdowns. I know the government did, some people did revel in lockdowns, but
it might.
Really hope it does not. As we say, Liz Truss is announcing a £150 billion universal package to freeze our energy bills for households across the country.
Consumers will be receiving a £400 rebate on energy bills on top of the £150 council tax rebate that many have already received.
Yes, well, with 14 million people in the UK living with disabilities, we're looking at what extra help they might need. And we're joined now by Jack Milnes, viewer of the channel and a concerned wheelchair user who got in touch with us to voice his concerns. We're really happy to have you this morning. Can you just firstly tell us what kind of extra help do you think people with disabilities need at the moment? What kinds of extra costs do they face?
Well, they're facing all sorts of costs from the fact that I can't use a washing line, so I'm reliant on a tumble dryer, and there's lots of users with medical equipment that they've got to run 24/7. So they are facing seriously increased costs. I mean, I've been looking at how to mitigate my costs, and I live in a council flat. All the land around me is communal, and I requested permission to put up a very small wind turbine, a 5 kilowatt wind turbine. It would only sit 2 meters off the ground, and it's less than 2 feet wide, and that would generate, as I said, 5 kilowatts. That would mitigate all of my electric needs, but the council have refused it. So there you go.
Fascinating, Jack. That's fascinating because. So just tell us, is it something that you became interested in terms of generating electricity because of this crisis in terms of bills now, or is it something that you were always considering?
No, it's something I've always been looking at. I mean, these units are £2,000. They integrate into your electric system, in my case, the flat, and would sit there and generate probably a total of about £3,000 a year. If we did that to the 1.6 million council properties that we have in this country, the cost of the units would be about 3 billion. But we would generate 12 gigawatts of electricity from wind. It's totally green, it's relatively cheap, and would make some of the most vulnerable people who live in council houses on low incomes almost energy self-sufficient. To me, it seems like a logical choice, but nobody listens to.
Jack, can I ask you on what grounds the planning permission for that was rejected?
Because the land is communal. It's a helix wind turbine, so it rotates around as opposed to blades. I mean, we're surrounded by 1 megawatt wind turbines here. We've got lots of them around, the big ones that you see in the wind farms. We would only actually need 250 of these smaller ones to generate the same amount of electricity. We literally could, and I think the government are set in their ways. They're reliant on energy companies. They want to keep those going, and they're not looking for an out-of-the-box type solution. Well, you know what I mean.
Yeah. And Jack, just very quickly, are you feeling more relieved now that you know Liz Truss is going to be announcing this package, or are you still a bit hesitant as to whether it will really all trickle down?
No, I think it's. I mean, 150 billion you're about. We're just putting that debt onto the next generation coming through. Our kids and people who are leaving university now are going to be paying for that for the rest of their lives. I think it's I don't know. I think there's probably a better solution.
Yeah, interesting. Well, look, Jack, we really appreciate your time this morning, and no doubt there'll be people who will be able to resonate with your story up and down the country. Thank you so much for your time. Well, let's now move on to speaking with Robert Halfon. He's a Conservative MP and he's chair of the Education Select Committee. He was also born with a form of cerebral palsy and has spoken about this in the past. Thank you, Robert, for joining us this morning. Look, first of all, of course, you now have a new leader in your party. Liz Truss is our new Prime Minister. She's set to make this announcement of this £150 billion package. Do you think the package she's going to announce is the right one?
Well, I want to wait to hear what she says. I'm going to go up to the chamber to hear her statement. But in principle, absolutely. I mean, millions of people across the country face potential destitution. I've got small businesses in Harlow, where I represent, going under, like fish and chip shops, because they can't afford to pay the energy bills. I've got schools whose energy bills have gone up by over £127,000. I've been told by the Association of Colleges that colleges are going up, the energy bills up potentially by 300%. My local GP surgery in Harlow where I go, their energy bill, the gas bills alone have gone up from £10,000 to £24,000. So it's unsustainable, because what this means is that small business will go under, means we'll have higher unemployment, they won't be able to invest in capital, but also our essential public services, instead of spending money on teacher support staff supporting pupils or on doctors and nurses, what will happen? They will be spending money on heating bills and have to cut back on staff, which is the last thing we need, especially given that schools were closed for most pupils during the pandemic.
Look, Robert, I don't know if you heard one of our viewers, Jack, there speaking about the extra costs people with disabilities face. As I understand it, there's a £150 disability cost of living payment due to be made to people eligible for that. So essentially, those people will be getting £150 more than everybody else. That seems like a very low sum, given the real struggles that those 14 million people potentially are facing compared to a lot of other people.
Well, actually, I hope that I suspect that Jack is classed as a vulnerable person because of his situation. I really wish him well, and I think it's wrong the council refused what he needed. But vulnerable households will be getting not £150 back, will be getting up to £1,200 back in support, because they're getting the £150 support for the disability benefits. They're getting £400 off their energy bills. They're getting other benefits as well, and it amounts to about £1,200 for 8 million vulnerable households across the United Kingdom. That's costs about £37 billion. That's completely separate to what Liz Truss, the new Prime Minister, is going to announce today. So not only will vulnerable families have £1,200 of support, they're also going to have the freeze, it looks like a freeze in energy bill costs for the next 2 years. But of course, we'll find out more details later.
Robert, this all sounds wonderful, and of course in the short term it will be extremely helpful for a lot of people. But we were talking to one journalist there whose assessment of the situation concluded that at the moment, human beings are behaving in a way that means we are minimising our usage because it's hitting us in the pocket. If we take away that incentive to be more careful, people will use more. We won't have increased supply for how long? Could be a couple of years, depending on what happens in Ukraine. And therefore, we're just kicking the can down the road, and we're going to end up with blackouts inevitably this winter, if not going into next year. What do you think of that assessment?
Well, I don't accept it, and I'll tell you why. The first thing is, don't forget, bills since last year have already gone up by, on average, £1,000. So they were about £1,000 on average. Now they're close to £2,000, if not more, for most households. Yeah. So already, I mean, if we ever imagined we'd be paying an average energy bill of £2,000, that would have been unthinkable. So already people are cutting back on their energy and turning off their lights and cutting back on their heating and doing all kinds of things. The second thing I'd say is, I don't want to be a government that we're supposed to be a free and prosperous country with the 5th largest economy in the world. I don't want to be a government that is nannying people and telling people when to put jumpers on or off. I believe actually most people have common sense. They're trying to save money as it is, because it isn't just energy bills gone up, it's food prices, it's petrol bills, it's phone bills, TV bills, well, you name it, everything has gone up. So people are sensible. So let's not have a kind of nannying government that is saying, telling people to put jumpers on. Let's have a government that is extending a helping hand at times of real crises. And I trust the British people to sort of have the common sense and do what is needed in order to try and reduce our energy uses.
Yeah, and of course we have to, the cap is on the price of a unit of energy. So, you know, if you use more energy, you will still, I suppose, pay more, and you're still paying much more than you were this time last year, I suppose. So, but I want to finish off with something Jack actually said towards the end there, which he said he's not very comfortable with the fact this is going to go on borrowing. This is going to be put on borrowing. It's going to be put on the country's credit card, essentially. And he said, look, it will be the next generation who are picking up the tab, essentially, for this plan Liz Truss is putting into place. Do you think it's right, you know, you work with children, you're in the Education Select Committee, is it right that we burden future generations with this sort of debt?
Well, Jack made a very powerful point, because the government's got to walk a tightrope between dealing with the cost of living, spending money on public services, and getting down our debt, which is £2 trillion. The problem is that millions of people literally face destitution. I mentioned the figures that schools and colleges and GP surgeries, in terms of their extortionate energy bills, it's just not sustainable. And what alternative do we have but to have a serious intervention program? We're in a time of a national emergency. That is not an exaggeration. We've got a war in Ukraine, sadly, because of Russia's actions. The energy supplies to Europe are limited. We have to intervene. There is no alternative, but we do need to make our energy much more secure. We need to have more oil, more fossil fuels, more storage of oil and gas facilities. I absolutely support fracking as well, so that in the long term we're never again dependent on importing energy supplies in the way that we are now. So there are a number of things that need to be done, but I can't see any other way unless you just accept that millions of people will face destitution, and I'm not prepared to accept that thousands of my constituents will go under and live in fear because they can't afford to pay their energy bills through no fault of their own. And don't forget, these and it's not just people on benefits, it's millions and millions of working people, those who are just about managing, who are doing 7-day-a-week jobs, often 2 jobs as well, just to try and keep their heads above water.
OK, thank you, Robert. Robert Halfon there, a Conservative MP and Chair of the Education Select Committee. You have been getting in touch with your views, as you always do so brilliantly. Anne has said, being old, I'm amazed at the expectations of everyone for the government to help them. In the past, when in dire straits because of war, etc., people in this country got on and tightened their belts and coped. We did not expect reimbursement. How spoilt and indulged we have become.
There is an argument to be made that that's the case, but also, aren't we meant to be one of the richest nations in the world? Why should people have to, scrimp and save and turn off their lights early or put on extra layers just because, the energy prices are so high? I don't think that's a quality of life we should accept when we are one of the richest nations in the world. But there you go. We will read more of your views after a break. But afterwards, we're going to talk about a new poll which shows overwhelming public support for building new renewable energy projects across the UK. Liz Truss is planning to also boost domestic energy production when she makes that announcement later on. And we ask how quickly this will benefit us. That's all after this morning's headlines.
Good morning, it's 10:35. I'm Alice Porter in the GB newsroom. Liz Truss says she will deal hands-on with the energy crisis as she sets out her plans later today to help households and businesses with soaring energy bills. The newly appointed Prime Minister is expected to announce that domestic bills will be frozen at around £2,500. But Labour has accused the PM of writing a blank cheque to the energy giants by ruling out a windfall tax on profits. The number of people in England waiting to start routine hospital treatment has risen to a record high. NHS England says 6.8 million people were waiting to start treatment at the end of July. That's an increase of 100,000 since June. It comes after health leaders wrote to the new Prime Minister urging that urgent action was needed to address the pressure felt by frontline services. Terror-related arrests have increased by 11% over the past year, according to the Home Office. There were 203 arrests for terrorism-related activity by the end of June, 20 more than in the previous 12 months. Only 24% of suspects were charged. The suspect in a stabbing in Canada that left 10 people dead and 18 others injured has died after he was captured by police. Miles Sanderson was taken into custody on Wednesday afternoon after a high-speed chase. Shortly after his arrest, police say he went into medical distress and was taken to a hospital in Saskatoon, where he was pronounced dead. Workers at Royal Mail are walking out today in further strikes in a dispute over pay and conditions. Staff in the Communication Workers Union are walking out for 2 days. They will also strike for 48 hours on September the 30th and October the 1st. Prince George, Princess Charlotte and Prince Louis have attended their first day of their new school. The siblings were accompanied by their parents, the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge, for a settling-in session at Lambrook School in Berkshire. TV, online and DAB+ radio, this is GB News.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
To each and every one of you.
For helping our great nation
Find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
across England, Scotland,
Wales and Northern Ireland.
On TV,
on radio and online.
We're proud to be the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flop at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Good morning, it's 10:39 and this is To The Point with myself, Mercy Moriki and Bev Turner on GB News. We're live on your TV, online and radio.
Now, Prime Minister Liz Truss is expected to announce her energy plan to help households and businesses with soaring energy costs. We think this is going to be at about 11:30, so stay with us on GB News. She'll be coming out at 10 Downing Street in the new house. Like to think she's got boxes, she's not unpacked yet, you know. All the kids moaning because they can't find anything when they're trying to go back to school. And she's going to be heading down to the House of Commons where she will make an announcement of what she's going to do.
Yeah, that's one way to kick off, isn't it? Your new school year. Anybody do anything over the summer? Yeah, well, my mum became Prime Minister, but apart from that, not much. But this will be Liz Truss's first major policy initiative as she insists the ban on fracking will be scrapped for Britain to become more energy self-dependent. The lifting of the ban is expected to take effect quite rapidly, which will allow companies to drill for shale gas by seeking planning permission.
So, however fracking is being pushed for greater energy security, the practice still remains hugely controversial. So joining us now is Jack Richardson, Senior Climate Programmes Manager at the Conservative Environment Network. Thank you for coming on, Jack. You've written in The Guardian that fracking won't be the answer to reducing our energy bills. Tell us why.
I'm not sure if that was me who wrote in The Guardian, I'm afraid. But I can definitely agree that fracking won't lower our bills because gas is internationally traded. We rely on the European market. So basically, Russia controls the price, and that's why we're having to fork out £150 billion. And that's going to be going on to future generations. I think if we want to make ourselves energy secure, however, if we're going to lift the ban on fracking, then we ought to do the same with a ban on onshore wind, which is far more popular and can produce power 9 times cheaper than gas can.
Normal complaints about fracking, Jack, remind us, because it's pretty much slipped off the news agenda, fracking, because it was banned. We've stopped talking about it. Remind us what the objections are, particularly for those who live in the areas where it's hoped that it's expected this will recommence.
So as I remember, Angela Leadsom placed a moratorium when she was Energy Secretary, and she said it's a shame because it could have helped us get to net zero because gas is a transitionary fuel and everything like that. But the people who live near fracking sites tend to be quite worried about the seismicity, so the little earthquakes that happen with fracking. And I think another reason is that small country lanes and you sort of have to take wastewater to and from fracking sites, and I think they get quite annoyed at that. So I think that was definitely the main reason that the moratorium was placed.
Yeah, As far as I understand it, obviously the details of these plans will be announced in an hour or so, and we'll be able to scrutinise it properly then. But as I understand it, there will still need to be permission from people in the local area as to whether they want, these planning permissions to be approved. What's to say that they just won't say, no, actually, we don't actually want this in our backyard, in which case we won't be able to open all these new fracking sites?
I don't think there is much to say that they'll suddenly want it, especially if the government's going to be paying their energy bills. Usually the new incentive that everyone's talking about is that fracking companies are promising to pay people's bills, but if the government's going to cap them, then maybe that'll sort of reduce the incentive. But as we're talking about people who want energy production in their backyard, we know so many people have been writing to Octopus Energy, for example, asking for onshore wind. There was new polling from Survation the other day that over 80% of even Conservative voters want onshore wind in their back garden, and that's because it can cut bills immediately. There's already onshore wind farms that are doing that. And it's not quite the same story of fracking. For instance, we don't actually know if fracking is economically viable in this country. And then you sort of it would be very difficult to sell it on the cheap to people, given that it's traded at international prices.
Is this all for you, Jack? When you obviously know this in great detail, even though you're not writing about it in The Guardian, we now know you must have someone with the same byline as you. But does this for you boil down to a complete lack of forward planning?
I'm not sure about that. I know we've been doing very well since 2015 on scaling up renewables, and they've really saved our bacon. Well, not quite as much as we'd hoped in this energy crisis. We need to build far more, but we've only just got started really. But they are already suppressing bills. It's just that because we're so dependent on gas, that's why our energy costs are going up, and that's why the government is having to spend £150 billion. I know that it's taking lots of measures in a new energy security strategy and a new energy security bill to sort of build in more forward planning. But I think the real key here is just to lift the ban on onshore wind and let renewables compete and let the market really drive forward investment into our new energy system.
OK. All right, thank you, Jack. Jack Richardson there, Senior Climate Programmes Manager at the Conservative Environment Network.
Yes. Now, I have a question for you. So this apparently, we will, as I say, we don't know the full details, but apparently this scheme will involve fracking companies being able to offer 25% reductions to the energy bills of people in the local community as a kind of incentive to let them frack in the area. Would you, if the fracking company said, look, I'll pay 25% of your energy bills, let me frack, around the back of your garden, would you say yes?
Well, I don't. This is the thing. That's why I was asking Jack then about what this means, because I don't feel that if it's not in your backyard, we don't really know what the implications would be. I've heard some stories about the tremors. My biggest concern, the one thing that I have read about, is that it can damage the water supply because the chemicals used in fracking can infect the water supply. If Liz Truss gives fracking the green light today, then those are the questions we're going to have to start asking, aren't they?
If I understand correctly, there was meant to be a review of all of that sort of evidence before they lifted the ban. It clearly hasn't been published yet. So it'd be interesting to see what the newest evidence is really on that fracking and what the effects are. We are still waiting for the new Prime Minister, Liz Truss, to leave Number 10 and be taken to Parliament, where she will be expected to be delivering that speech alongside the new Chancellor, Kwasi Kwarteng. They're going to be announcing a £150 billion package of support for both households, and it's expected for businesses as well, which will essentially cap energy prices. Quite complicated. We're going to get somebody to explain to you what exactly capping energy prices means, because it won't be that, you won't have to pay above a certain amount. It's capping the unit price.
Yeah.
But don't worry, we'll get somebody to
explain it, because a lot of you are getting in touch and saying, does that mean that if I don't pay £2,500 now, I'm going to? No, it doesn't. So don't worry, but we will explain it in layman's terms, because I think we're all a bit baffled by what the cap actually means. It seems to be anything but a cap. Right, now, as energy prices do rocket, hospitality is also hurting. It's already suffering to recover post-pandemic and struggling with staff shortages. Anybody who's been into a pub or a restaurant recently will know that. And these businesses simply can't afford these energy bills and face closure. So unlike households, businesses are not protected by the current energy cap ahead of a promised set of measures today. What does the hospitality sector need to hear from the new PM? Well, Rosie Wright is at the Woodman pub in North London. Good morning, Rosie. What are you hearing down there at the pub this morning? It's terrifying times for businesses.
Yeah, very good morning to both.
Oh, dear.
Oh, okay. So, sorry, Rosie. We're just going to live pictures now of Liz Truss, the new Prime Minister, getting in her car from Downing Street, where she will be swiftly taken over across the road to Parliament. For that big announcement, she is expected to make a £150 billion announcement for energy prices. She will say she'll freeze energy bills for up to 2 years. And she's expected to also announce the end of a ban on fracking and giving the go-ahead for oil and gas drilling in the North Sea. So very shortly, in about, I'd say about 40 minutes, we will be bringing you live pictures of Liz Truss in Parliament with that announcement.
So let's go back to Rosie now. Always, we can never have too much Rosie Wright. So she's at the Woodman pub in North London. Good morning, Rosie. Sorry about that. We did have to go to see Liz Truss leaving. It's a very busy door, very busy street, that at the moment. But what's it like down there in North London?
Well, lots of anticipation. The landlord here checking constantly, talking to other people in hospitality. What might the new Prime Minister say? Because it's going to have a real material impact on how people here can run their businesses. I'm actually at the Red Lion and Sun, and I want to introduce you now to Heath, who's been the owner of this pub for the last 15 years. So you've gotten through a financial crisis, a pandemic, 2 lockdowns. Yeah. What is hurting your business the most now?
Energy. Energy's just out of control. It used to be like 5%. Now it's about 18%, of my costs. It's really scary. How do we sustain that? And who knows what it looks like tomorrow? It keeps on just going up. We've got no cap. So we need the government to do something.
So you've been preparing for lunch this morning. Let's just go back a few years ago. How different have the energy prices meant your day-to-day operations?
I feel like my father going around the house, turning all the lights off and complaining about the price of things. We don't turn the lights on fully till we open. We're turning equipment off and bringing it back on later. Looking at everything, how much, the kitchen extraction fan, we turn that down so it's not running on full. Just very aware, more so than ever, because it's so expensive to run everything. We're just constantly looking at everything and how much, and we're putting a price on everything we look at. So it's scary, it's nerve-wracking.
Give us an idea of the bottom line of what your gas and electricity bills are like and how they've changed and how they could change further if we don't have intervention from the Prime Minister.
And so I'm lucky with my gas. I'm still in contract and that expires next year. But I looked at my summer usage. If my gas was at the new rates that have been quoted, I'd be paying $2,500 a month as opposed to $600. My electricity, I was paying $16,000 a year. My new contract, I was lucky to get a contract. A lot of people can't. $65,000 based on my current usage, and we're turning everything off. And that's not sustainable. I have to take a proper haircut. The irony, but 50 grand in more a year I've got to find. But that's if you're working on 10% EBITDA, that means I've got to find another £500,000 net to pay that.
So the question people will be asking at home is, well, what does that mean for me, the customer? Am I paying more? Where are you squeezing those costs?
Well, that's the thing, though, isn't it? You pass it on. You get less customers coming in the door because it's too expensive to go out. So right now I'm absorbing a lot of it, tweaking some prices, but I don't want to scare people away. And everyone's watching their pennies right now. So the last thing I need is less customers. And that's what's hurting right now. Hospitality, we're losing customers. They're staying at home, watching TV, buying alcohol at home. It's scary. It's really scary.
Heath, thank you very much. So the reality is we've got a bit of an indication of what might happen for individual households, but not yet a suggestion of how Liz Truss might help businesses. Well, we'll be catching up with Heath later. After that announcement, Liz Truss currently on her way to make that statement. We'll bring it to you here, of course, to find out the reaction from people running businesses who want to welcome in you and me to come and have a drink and a Sunday lunch to see if it's going to be possible for them to maintain their businesses.
Wow, Rosie, thank you so much. So many businesses will have exactly the same story.
Figures are eye-watering. How can it go from 16 to £65,000?
That is, yeah, gosh, it's insane, isn't it? I have no idea how they're going to absorb that. But let's talk to Andrew Goodacre, shall we? He's the CEO of the British Independent Retailers Association. Thank you so much for speaking with us. I'm sure you heard that gentleman there who owns that pub talking about this astronomical rise. I think I calculated it's a 300% plus increase in his energy bill. Is that the same thing you're seeing across the businesses and retailers you represent?
Good morning. Sadly, we're seeing worse. We were seeing 300% increases last October when we first flagged this problem to government. And more recently, we've been seeing increases of 500, 600%. So the rate per kilowatt hour, which is the rate that energy companies are charging, is increasing from 14p per hour pre this crisis. And businesses are now being quoted 70, 80p per hour. So it really is quite shocking to see the speed of the increase and the size of that increase on small businesses on high streets.
What sort of timescale do you think these businesses are looking at? That's the burning question, really, isn't it? Because they might say, we can't even stay open another month. We can't stay open 6 months or a year. What are you hearing?
Well, we did some research with members, a very quick snap poll a couple of weeks ago. What that was telling us was that their initial reaction to the price rises in energy was to put prices up. But as the previous interviewee explained, that prices can only go so far because customers will not keep paying more. And 40% indicated that they would look to reduce their opening hours. And of that, 20-odd% were saying that they may even consider closing temporarily or for good. And I think what we will see through the winter months, irrespective of today's announcement, is that there is still an absolute need to reduce energy usage within the businesses. And I think businesses will look at their trading patterns, will look at when they expect to be busy, when they expect to be quiet. And I think in the run up to Christmas, we will see businesses probably close a little bit longer, open a little bit later, close some days when they're really quiet, and look to focus on the days when they expect to be busy. Where if things don't happen in the golden quarter, as we call it, the final quarter is so important for retail. It's the run up to Christmas is when people in shops do make better sales, do actually make some profit. And that helps them through January, February. If we don't have that successful golden quarter or that successful final quarter, January, February next year, I think we'd expect to see a lot of businesses choose to close, lockdown, almost impose a lockdown on themselves in order to save the cost that will hurt their businesses and are hurting their businesses now.
Yeah, gosh, a dire situation, and let's hope when Liz Truss makes that announcement in about half an hour, she will offer something really strong for businesses that will make you guys happy and make you guys survive and not have to shut your doors, eh? Andrew, thank you so much for joining us, CEO of the British Independent Retailers Association.
OK, now, today marks an exciting new beginning for the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge. Life's pretty exciting anyway, I would have thought, as their three children, Prince George, Princess Charlotte and Prince Louis, start at their new school, Lambrook, in County Berkshire.
Yes, well, by the way, we're showing a picture, it's everywhere, it's in the newspapers. We're showing a picture of Prince William and Catherine walking along with their kids into school. And Prince George is so tall because his mother is 5'9", roughly.
Yeah.
She's wearing heels, and it comes up to her shoulder.
You know what? I find these images really odd because if you're listening on the radio, they're walking through the grounds of Lambrook, I believe. Yeah. I've been to that school. I was writing an article for a magazine about school dinners awards, and I think they might have won. They were amazing. It's beautiful, absolutely beautiful. And they're walking through the grounds, and you've got Louis holding hands with his mother, but apparently kept trying to take his hand away from his mum because nobody likes to hold hands with their mum when they're that age.
He's got quite a strong, robust personality, hasn't he?
Well, I hope so. He's going to flipping need it. But if you look at them, this isn't their first day, because I looked at it and I went, where's their kit bag? Why is she not loaded down with a load of stuff that she needs to read alongside the 25 WhatsApp groups she's going to end up on? You know, and of course, these pictures were staged yesterday because they start school today, and I imagine it will be a bit too complicated to have all the press there on the day that they start.
Isn't it a settling in type situation? I don't know. But
Probably.
either way, I love these pictures. They're so cute. You know, it makes you kind of a spot. I have one child. You have three.
I've got three.
You?
One's just left this time.
Yeah, I want three. Three is a good number for a number of children.
It's a nightmare. They fight all the time. But I you know, they're lovely, but they do fight all the time. Three is an odd number. So what have you been telling us? And by the way, I hope you got all your kids off to school properly and safely and without massive nightmares this week. This Bob has said, stop being negative about what Truss wants to do to help out with the bills. She's got no choice but to freeze them.
We're not being negative. We're looking at her plans, critiquing them, which is what we should be able to do because it's £150 billion, which is astronomical. As our business and economics editor Liam said, that's doubling borrowing for this year's borrowing.
My concern is that we won't change our behaviour unless these bills are significantly bad. And I mean, there's a certain strata of people, I think, who probably, you know, and the wealthy people actually, who can afford to pay them without changing their behaviour. And I agree with what Sam was saying earlier about the fact that we should really be helping those who desperately need this. They're still going to have to turn off turn their heating down and turn off the gas fine, whatever. And this is from, what was this one? Paul said, Mercy, you can't be happy all this borrowing to cap energy. I'm not. My son is also in his 20s, has just bought his first home like you. Your daughter is also much younger. They're the ones who are going to be paying it back. It's not fair on the young generation.
I'm not happy. I need to actually think about what I think about all this, which I'll be able to do when she reveals the plans and we can all pick it apart in detail and then decide how we feel about it. But for now, keep all your thoughts coming in because we're going to take a short break. We will be back with another hour, including, of course, those live pictures of Liz Truss in Parliament. So stay with us for that.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
To each and every one of you.
For helping our great nation
Find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
across England, Scotland,
Wales and Northern Ireland.
On TV.
on radio and online.
We're proud to be
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flop at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Good morning. This is To The Point on GB News with me, Mercy Muraki and Bev Turner. We're on your TV, radio and online.
If you can see me smiling, Liam Halligan's just walked into the studio. That always makes me smile. We're with you until midday with all the updates that you need on the day's biggest stories, not least that huge energy package being announced by the Prime Minister this morning.
Yes, not long to wait. We're expecting that in about half an hour, and we will be bringing you that live here on GB News, so stay tuned for that. In the meantime, you've been getting in touch with lots of your views, and keep them coming in at gbviews@gbnews.uk. Let us know if you're feeling relieved this morning ahead of that announcement, nervous. Let us know what you think. That's all coming up after this morning's headlines.
Good morning. It's 2 minutes past 11. I'm Alice Porter in the GB newsroom. Liz Truss says she will deal hands-on with the energy crisis as she sets out her plans later today to help households and businesses with soaring energy bills. The newly appointed Prime Minister is expected to announce that domestic bills will be frozen at around £2,500. There are also reports that she could also lift the ban on fracking. But Labour has accused the PM of writing a blank cheque to the energy giants by ruling out a windfall tax on profits. Levelling Up Secretary Simon Clarke says the government wants to give more certainty to households amidst the energy crisis.
What we're aiming to do today is to provide clarity and comfort for people and for businesses that their bills won't go to unmanageable levels during the course of the winter and spring that lie ahead, and that we really do tackle this problem at source rather than go through a series of sort of piecemeal solutions offering a bit more money at a time. This is an attempt to address the costs in a way which provides predictability and certainty, and which will allay the concerns, I think, of so many people that they're going to face an unmanageable pressure.
The number of people in England waiting to start routine hospital treatment has risen to a record high. NHS England says 6.8 million people were waiting to start treatment at the end of July. That's an increase of 100,000 since June. It comes after health leaders wrote to the new Prime Minister warning that urgent action was needed to address the pressure felt by frontline services. Terror-related arrests have increased by 11% over the past year, according to the Home Office. There were 203 arrests for terrorism-related activity by the end of June, 20 more than in the previous 12 months. Only 24% of suspects were charged. Workers at Royal Mail are walking out today in further strikes in a dispute over pay and conditions. Staff in the Communication Workers Union will also strike for 48 hours on the September the 30th and October the 1st. David Ward is General Secretary of the CWU and accuses Royal Mail of looking to sell off the company.
The company are involved in talks behind our backs, behind the backs of the public, to hand over Royal Mail to an equity investment offshore company based in Luxembourg. The government are aware of that. They've called that company in for a due diligence test, so it's making it very difficult for us to actually know what is really going on.
The suspect in a stabbing in Canada that left 10 people dead and 18 others injured has died after he was captured by police. Miles Sanderson was taken into custody on Wednesday afternoon after a high-speed chase. Shortly after his arrest, police say he went into medical distress and was taken to a hospital in Saskatoon, where he was pronounced dead. A medicine for menopausal women is to be sold over the counter without the need for prescription for the first time in the UK. Boots launched the hormone product today, with more stores set to offer it by the end of October. It will be available for women aged 50 and over who have not had a period in the last year. It was revealed this year that a shortage of hormone replacement therapy medication left some women sharing prescriptions and others feeling suicidal. Artificial sweeteners used as a sugar replacement in a wide range of food and drink have been linked to an increased risk of heart disease. Researchers in France say that food additives should not be considered a healthy and safe alternative to sugar. They also found that artificial sweetener consumption was linked to a 9% higher risk of heart disease. Prince George, Princess Charlotte and Prince Louis have all attended their first day at their new school. The siblings were accompanied by their parents, the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge, for a settling-in session at Lambert School in Berkshire. This is GB News. We'll bring you more news as it happens. Now let's return to the point.
Good morning. This is To The Point on GB News with myself, Mercy Moroki, and Bev Turner on your TV, radio and online.
OK, so the Prime Minister is set to give out her long-awaited plan to tackle the energy crisis in about half an hour, maybe less. Millions of households are expected to see their energy bills capped at around £2,500 a year. We'll explain what that means, but at a cost to the taxpayer of 150 billion quid. We're going to be bringing you that statement live when we get it about 11:30.
Yes, and as we wait for that, we're looking into what else we can expect from Liz Truss today. It's not just that cap she's announcing. She's also set to announce a host of other measures to ramp up our domestic energy production. We'll take you through all of those.
And boy, do we need them. And finally, we're going to be looking at the performance of our NHS in England and Wales after new figures were published this morning on waiting times.
Yes, I'll let you know now, they're not very good. So, yeah, we have all of that coming up and much more as well across the programme. Get in touch with your views, gbviews@gbnews.uk. We'd really love to know what you're thinking this morning as you wait for that statement by Liz Truss.
So we are waiting for Liz Truss to tell us what's happening with her plan to tackle the energy crisis. We've got these extraordinary bills, haven't we? These ridiculous energy bills. And as part of that scheme, millions of households are going to see their energy bills capped at around £2,500 a year. This is the figure we keep giving you, but we're going to explain it in just a moment.
Yes, and it's going to be paid through borrowing, apparently, so not through windfall tax, for instance, which is what Labour were calling for. That's not the route she's decided to go down, it seems. Your views have been coming in thick and fast this morning, and please keep them coming in. But here to help us explain all the nitty-gritty of all of this, we're joined by Liam Halligan, who's our business and economics editor. Liam, me and Beth want to focus on one thing because we do keep getting in lots of views about this. What does this cap mean? And by that, I mean, she's saying, OK, we're going to cap them at around 2,500. That doesn't mean people aren't necessarily going to end up paying more than that, does it?
It is pretty complicated, and we're going to spend a lot of the next 24 hours talking about this, explaining this. And I think all of us on GB News are really committed to drilling down into the detail, because a lot of people have been very worried about this. We should just rewind a little bit. For a month or so, I've been saying on GB News it's going to be £3,600 as the cap, the average cap, and I'll explain what an average cap is in a moment. That's because the Ofgem energy regulator announced that, because that's what wholesale prices suggest the cap should be. The gas that the energy providers pay, the price they pay before they sell the gas onto us, and gas, of course, is used to generate electricity in many instances. That cap is now being scrapped. That £3,600 cap is being scrapped because the government is going to pay for the difference between wholesale prices and retail prices, so bringing retail prices down to a lower level. Now, how can you cap an average bill? The cap is on the amount of units, energy units that you use. So if you live in a one-bedroom flat, you're likely to use a lot less, unless you've got 4 washing machines or something, and you keep all the lights on all the time. If you live in a 4-bedroom house, a 5-bedroom house, or whatever, you're going to be paying more. So the cap is on the average unit. And when we say £2,000 cap, £2,500 cap, that's the average unit times by the amount of energy the average household uses. Yes. So it's worth ironing out that confusion.
So essentially, there's going to be a cap on the unit price.
That's right.
Which means that the average person will pay a capped price, but it doesn't mean they won't go above that. It means the average will be lower because the unit price is lower.
That's right. So if you do use more energy, you will pay a lot more than this cap that we're talking about. And some people say, oh, if you put a cap on, that means there's an incentive to use as much energy as you want. No, that's not actually... I mean, I've heard many broadcasters say that.
I wouldn't say that.
It's not,
I am one of those.
It's not actually true, because you're still paying more because you're using more units of energy. It's not free above the cap.
And you're still paying double what you were pretty much this time last year.
Absolutely right.
But my worry is, unless this is communicated properly, there will be people who think, oh, brilliant, government are picking up the bill again. Awesome. Well, hot showers, kids.
That's why, I mean, maybe I'm old-fashioned, but I believe very, very, very strongly in economic and business journalism that bothers to take the time to explain what's going on. People really care about this stuff.
Yeah.
People in pubs, yes, they talk about football and soap operas, but they also talk about economics and business the whole time, particularly during a cost of living crisis.
So just to be clear, it's not only us, the customer, that will benefit from the government bankrolling this difficult situation. It's also the energy suppliers, because they're going to get that gap filled by taxpayers' money.
Yes, to some degree, but they're still paying very elevated prices on wholesale markets. As Mercy said, a lot more than they were paying, this time last year. Even, months before the war in Ukraine, energy prices were elevated. So what Liz Truss is going to announce is, how incredible somebody that was elected Tory Prime Minister by the Tory faithful on a sort of low-tax, small state ticket.
Yeah.
In her first week, she's unveiling a package that's going to be 100 billion plus, which is more than the cost of furlough. Quite incredible, but we do live in incredible times. She did need to do something. She's going to put forward proposals that will be implemented very quickly. I think the energy price cap will be in place for 18 months, possibly 2 years. Yes, the government will stand behind the energy providers, not the energy companies that get the stuff out the ground, the retailers of energy, if you like. They're going to take on loans so they can buy wholesale gas price at a higher price than they sell it to customers, and that's where the lower prices will come in. But as you say, rightly, Mercy, it may be £2,000 on average, it may be £2,500, that 400 quid for all households, which Rishi Sunak announced earlier this year. That may or may not stay in place. I suspect it will. That's why there's confusion among journalists. Some are saying 2,500, some are saying 2,000. It is 2,000 if the 400 quid is still there. On top of that, also, Bev, importantly, sorry, I do think there's going to be additional benefits for particularly vulnerable households who qualify for housing benefit, disability allowance and so on. There will be a lot of help, but it is still going to be autumn and winter where we're paying a lot more, as Mercy says, for our energy than we usually do.
Am I right in saying the one person who'll be really happy about this is Putin?
I think to some...
he's going to go, this is awesome, this is working. They're going to bankrupt themselves because I've turned off the taps.
I think what this shows is the extent to which this war in Ukraine is having a massive geopolitical impact, without doubt. And of course, when war in Ukraine first happened, the Western world was saying, oh, we're going to not take oil and gas from Russia. And now is the Kremlin saying, actually, no, we're choosing not to send you the oil and gas. And imagine if we're, in Germany, 80% of their gas comes from Russia. I think what this also shows, though, is that markets are starting to work. Look, if I wanted to be really contrary today, I could, point out things like the fact that the price of oil has actually just gone below $90 a barrel for the first time in a long time.
Yeah.
I was just looking at prices on wholesale gas markets. They're actually falling quite steeply at the moment because the market finds ways to get round the sanctions. The sanctions are almost invented to have little loopholes in them, so they look politically tough, but they aren't quite as painful as they otherwise would be. Look, a lot of this depends. There's a lot of figures floating around. It's going to cost 100 billion, 150 billion. We just don't know how much it's going to cost because the cost is driven by the difference between the wholesale gas price and this cap that's being announced. So who knows? Anyone that says they know, they're not actually being honest with us. It may be that if wholesale prices do come down, with or without some resolution of war in Ukraine, then this may be a lot cheaper than a lot of people are saying. But in the here and now, yes, it's messy. Yes, we can criticise this in many ways, but the government simply had to do something.
In order to keep businesses going, in order for people to be able to spend money in the economy, go out and buy our shopping and all of that.
Just imagine if all these businesses with massive increases in their energy bills had gone bankrupt. I mean, then you've got a jobless crisis.
Yeah, absolutely.
Liam, you're brilliant. You know everything. I could just sit here and talk to you all day.
Yes, thank you so much, Liam. Well, it's about 15 minutes or so until we expect Liz Truss to make that announcement. So it is then when we will be able to hear the detail of this plan. But in the meantime, what does the government need to do to help those most in need? And what will the opposition make of today's announcement? Of course, they were calling for a cap not long ago. Well, joining us now is Paymana Assad, who's a Labour councillor in London. As I said there, thank you for joining us. As I said, Labour were calling for a cap not long ago. In fact, I think a week or so ago. Your package, your party's package that you announced, would have cost around £29 billion. It would have been £29 billion of help. So I assume you're very pleased that actually what Liz Truss is offering is 3 to 4 times more than that.
Well, not exactly. I think it's interesting because Liz Truss obviously said in her leadership campaign that she was against windfall taxes, and she repeated that over and over again. But I think the thing that Labour really struggles to understand with Liz Truss's thinking is, why does she want to protect excess profits of oil and gas giants? And why is she doing that by getting extra on borrowing and not raising that through taxing excess profits of oil and gas companies? That's where Labour's struggling to understand the new Prime Minister's pledges and promises at the moment. And I think it's quite fascinating for me to watch because, previously the Tories have always accused Labour to be the party of borrowing. And now Labour have put forward a plan where you raise the money needed to support families during the cost of living by having a windfall tax, by continuing to tax the excess profits of oil and gas companies, by raising corporation tax. And yet all of those ideas have been rejected by the Conservatives and specifically by Liz Truss. And she said she'd rather do it by borrowing money. So I think that voters will have...
So you mentioned, you're being very critical of Liz Truss for not raising this money by a further windfall tax. Of course, there has already been one announced by the ex-Chancellor, Rishi Sunak. How much would Labour's plan have raised through that additional tax on oil and gas companies?
Well, it's projected or estimated to be around 170 billion on the excess profits of oil and gas companies.
No, how much would Labour have? Labour announced a plan. They said that we've announced this package. It's going to cost around £29 billion. How much of that would have been raised through taxing oil and gas companies?
The windfall tax that was announced by the former Chancellor, the new plans that Labour wants to put in would raise 170 billion on continuing to tax the excess profits of oil and gas companies and raising corporation tax. But obviously the specifics are there to be thrashed out once Liz Truss comes out with
Labour's plans, actually. Documents that Labour have personally shared showed that an additional tax on oil and gas producers would have raised £8 billion of that £29 billion package. So actually, it wouldn't have raised that much anyway, even if you had implemented, if you were in government, even if you implemented a further tax. That's according to Labour's own figures, £8 billion.
Well, like I said, there's 3 different ideas that Labour have come up with. And so each of those streams of ideas would come up with different streams of money. But I think the main point here is that what Labour doesn't want to see is Liz Truss going full on the borrowing aspect, because we know that future generations will have to continue to pay that money off. And this sort of trickle-down economics might not actually work in the way that Liz Truss, is saying that it will. I'm looking forward to seeing exactly what her plans are later today and what exactly the Tories come up with. But I think that families across this country really do need help, and they will be asking why the government won't tax excess profits of oil and gas companies, and why it's okay that families are struggling whilst others walk away with billions in profits.
OK, thank you, Paymana. Good to see you. Paymana, as said there, Labour councillor in London. Now, after the break, we're going to go over the latest figures released this morning showing your National Health Service, how it's performing.
Can I just say, I really think she's confusing the excess profits they've made globally with the profits they would have, with how much Labour would have raised. The £170 billion figure is the excess profits these oil and gas companies have had globally. The idea that that's how much would have been raised by Labour is absurd.
If we'd have more time, we're up against the clock a bit because we are going to go straight to the House of Commons as soon as we can, but I would have liked to have asked her what that looks like for those energy companies. What do they do if they are given this massive windfall tax? What does that mean for their employees, etc., etc.? There's always the knock-on effect, isn't it, of all of these. Now, we are going to go for a quick break. First of all, though, here is the weather.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
to each and every one of you
for helping our great nation
find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Across England, Scotland,
Wales and Northern Ireland.
On TV,
on radio and online.
We're proud to be
the People's Channel,
Britain's
news channel.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flop at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. Over a drink, we have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panelists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Good morning, it's 11:23. This is To The Point with me, Bev Turner, and Mercy Muroki on GB News. We're live on your TV, online and radio this morning.
Yes, now the number of people in England waiting to start routine hospital treatment has risen to a new record high. A total of 6.8 million people were waiting to start treatment at the end of July. That's according to newly released NHS England figures.
What a surprise. Our political reporter, Catherine Forster, is outside St Thomas's Hospital for us. Good morning, Catherine. I say it's not a surprise, but it's not, is it really? Coming off the back of the last couple of years where it felt like nothing but COVID matters and treatment was just left in limbo. What are the feelings down there this morning from patients, from doctors, from managers? What are you picking up on?
Well, obviously, these figures make for grim reading. We're hearing all the time, aren't we, about the pressures on the NHS, the wait times. The figures out this morning for England just go to reinforce that. So 1 in 8 of us are now waiting for routine hospital treatment. That is a record. In terms of the 2-year wait, that is down slightly. Now, 2,885 people waiting more than 2 years to begin treatment. That is down from 24,000 in January, but the government had promised to eliminate that completely by July. Obviously, they have failed to do that. Wes Streeting, Shadow Labour Health Secretary, already commenting on those broken promises. In terms of ambulances, people were waiting nearly an hour. Now it's down to 42 minutes, 44 seconds. That's an average for Category 2 calls. That's people that may have had heart attacks, may have had strokes, bad burns, very urgent calls. And again, with A&E, 4-hour waits, we're supposed to be through A&E done and dusted, aren't we, within 4 hours. In fact, 3 in 10 of us are still waiting. So it's a mixed picture, but clearly the NHS is missing its overall targets by a very, very long way. And the incoming Health Secretary, Therese Coffey, is going to have a monumental task on her hands. We are expecting an announcement next week from her. Liz Truss, of course, the incoming Prime Minister, has promised to prioritise the NHS and put it in a firm footing, but clearly a lot of work to be done, judging by today's figures.
Catherine, thank you for that shocking figures, especially those ambulance waiting times, really awful. Well, here for further analysis is former Health Secretary Alan Milburn. Thank you for joining us. Category 2, the average waiting time we mentioned there is 42 minutes, 44 seconds. Now, Category 2 is something like chest pain or a stroke. 42 minutes to wait for an ambulance on average. That is appalling, isn't it?
It is. It's a catastrophe. And frankly, I've never seen the NHS in the state that it is today. It's at breaking point. It really is. You can take any number you like, but it's broadly all moving in the wrong direction. And by the way, this is not just a consequence of COVID. Waiting times have been getting worse now for a decade, since 2012. So if we keep doing what we've been doing over the course of the last decade, we're going to get what we've been getting, and that's a deterioration in performance. And obviously that's despite the best efforts of doctors, nurses, managers and other people who are on the front line. So something radically needs to change, and it needs to change quick.
Opinion, Alan, what would you do?
I think there's some short-term measures and there's some sort of longer-term ones. I think the short-term measures, for example, during COVID, because it was a national emergency, and what we've got to do is we've got to elevate this. The government has got to make the point that this is a national emergency on waiting times. We've got to do some of the measures that we did then. We recruited back into the NHS doctors and nurses who'd left. We've got to make it attractive for them to do so. Big part of the big problem is the lack of capacity, the shortage of staff, 150,000 people that we're missing at the moment. So we've got to get some of those guys back in quickly. We've got to use new technology. Again, during COVID, we created these virtual wards where we could monitor people in their homes, in the community. That had a really fantastic effect in those hospitals where it was implemented. It basically doubled the capacity of those wards in those hospitals and reduced readmission rates by about a third. There's some of that going on, but again, it needs elevating. It needs to be made a priority. That's the short term. The longer term is, look, this is going to take years to correct. The government's got to be honest with people. It's got to set out a very clear plan with stages, what we're going to see by when, and then it's going to have to undertake some radical reforms. Waiting times only fell when I was the Health Secretary, when we introduced radical reforms into the NHS. Money's important, but the reform is absolutely critical. And back then, remember, people had been waiting well over 18 months for a hospital operation, and in the end, over a number of years, we got it down to a maximum of 18 weeks. So it can be done, but it needs urgency. It needs an acknowledgement of the problem politically, and it needs an urgent plan of action for the long term.
So if what you're saying is that under Tony Blair, who you were working with, we were in a much better state, what then went wrong? Which of your policies were undone?
A number, unfortunately. So, for example, one of the big things that really changed was, if you remember, there was a big controversy in the early 2000s about these NHS foundation hospitals that I created, which were really about liberating people working at the front line, the doctors, the nurses, the manager, to get on with the jobs rather than be subject to all sorts of interference from the top. So they had a lot more autonomy. That's been undone. Unfortunately, and there's much more deep performance management from the centre now. If you remember, it was very controversial at the time, but for the first time I gave choice for patients so they could effectively shop around deciding what was the best hospital for them. I was indifferent as to whether that was a public hospital in the NHS or a private hospital, because in the end, we were going to pay for it, the taxpayer was going to pay. They were NHS patients being treated according to NHS values. There's much less focus now on patient choice, how we use the private sector. So a lot of these changes that were introduced have been diluted over the course of the last few years, and that has been calamitous in terms of its impact. So we need to go back to some of those measures, but we need to go forward and look at how we can use technology to ease the pressure on the hospitals. All the data tells you very consistently that 1 in 4 people who are in hospital today needn't ever be there. If you intervene early enough, if you intervene what they call upstream before the illness gets too serious, and if you provide the right care in the community by investing in primary care, community infrastructure, and critically, this new technology that we now have available to us. So that's what the government needs to get on and do.
We do now, in just a moment, have to go over to the House of Commons Live, but just before we do that, very finally, is he still there? Is Alan still there? Is Alan still there? No? Okay, I don't think we've got... Okay, Alan's still there. I just do finally want to ask you, Alan, you know, Liz Truss has said throughout her campaign she intends to reverse this national insurance rise that we saw come in. We know that was for health and social care. Is reversing that rise a mistake? Yes or no?
I think it probably is a mistake. If they are going to reverse it, they better be clear about where the money is going to come from, because part of the reason that you've got these escalating waiting times problems is about the wholesale collapse of social care. Patients get into hospital and then they can't be got out. And it's a terrible term that people use about these people. They talk about bed blocking. It isn't about bed blocking. It's the fact that patients want to be out, their families want them to be out, but the social care support simply isn't available. And if what the new Prime Minister does is remove that spending commitment, which was all about apparently increasing funds for social care, then we're going to exacerbate the problem rather than relieve it.
OK, thank you, Alan. Former Health Secretary Alan Milburn there. We're looking at the House of Commons images. We're waiting for Liz Truss to speak. I'd also say, don't forget, we lost 100,000 care home workers because they were told they had to take an injection that they didn't want. So that's part of the problem of why the social care is in such a mess.
And just to recap, we are looking at live pictures of the Commons right now. We are waiting for the new Prime Minister, Liz Truss, to stand up. She is set to announce a £150 billion package, which will freeze energy bills for up to 2 years. This will be both for households and for businesses. She also we expect her to announce a ban on fracking and to announce the end to the ban on fracking, which came in 2019, and also give the go-ahead for oil and gas companies to drill in the North Sea. So a host of measures expected to come into force. I think we're seeing there, that is Penny Mordaunt, of course, who was one of Liz Truss's rivals earlier in the race. She is now the leader of the House of Commons. So you will be, who was previously Jacob Rees-Mogg, I can't remember now. But you will be seeing a lot of her for sure. So yes, just waiting there for the Prime Minister. In the meantime, let's go to some of your views.
Just looking to what you guys have been saying to us. Alex has said, when it gets down to it for the poor, when your energy costs get bigger than your income, that is when people start dying. My wife, a retired teacher, and myself, a retired self-employed carpenter, are now officially in fuel poverty. We followed all the rules, says Alex. A green boiler, LED light, an electric car even. We switch everything off when not needed. There is nothing else we can do. So if we're in a difficult situation, what are the rest like? We constantly see huge sums of money being given out to illegal immigrants, on foreign aid and wars while people die on our streets. Politicians just don't seem to care, and the public purse for their energy bills.
That's the purpose of today. I would think Liz Truss would suggest that that's exactly why she is standing up today, and given that massive, huge package, £150 billion. Many people think it's a terrible idea. Many people say she doesn't have much of a choice than to hand out those huge sums of cash to everybody because everybody's struggling. Let's go to Jeff, who says, how about the government sends out leaflets on how to economise energy, like making sure every light in your dwelling has LED bulbs, turn off all appliances, not the fridge or freezer, obviously, at night. There are so many ways to save energy, and lots of people need to be told, or lots of people need the support, maybe, to actually insulate their homes.
And Marcus said it's
long-term strategies.
Climate activists want bills to be sky high because they want people to switch everything off. What is the alternative to Truss's plan? Every generation has always paid the price of their predecessors. This is nothing new.
cynical view there. Let's bring in our business and economics editor, Liam Halligan, who is just sitting alongside us as we wait for Liz Truss to stand up in Parliament and deliver that package. Liam, a bit of a recap on what we're expecting to hear, please.
Well, we've been speaking for weeks about an October energy price cap of around £3,600 for the typical household. That's now out the window. So, a bit odd for the last 3 or 4 weeks. Households have been really, really worried about that. A lot of people have been losing sleep about that, but that's now being scrapped. And a new price cap's going to come in that's below wholesale energy prices of more like £2,000 to £2,500 a year for the typical household. If you live in a bigger house and you use more energy, it will cost you more. If you live in a flat or a mid-terraced house, it will cost you less. The government has to pay that difference between the wholesale energy price and the retail energy price. That's going to amount to tens of billions of pounds a year. How does it pay that money? Well, what it's going to do, it's going to lend the money. The energy companies, the energy retailers are going to borrow the money, and the government's going to stand behind those loans. So the energy retailers will be passing on the gas, the electricity at lower prices than it costs them to deliver it. That is how the mechanism is going to work. It's controversial, but it's a very effective way of making sure everyone benefits. But even that phrase, everyone benefits, is a problem, Mercy, because that means that wealthy people get just as much help as people who are less well off. That's why there will be extra help at the lower end for more vulnerable and less well off families, and rightly so.
And there'll be a big question mark over the arithmetic of all of this, because on one hand, Liz Truss is about to stand up shortly and announce that £150 billion package. On the other hand, she's saying, I'm a tax-cutting Prime Minister, and I'm going to cut your taxes, I'm going to cut income tax, I'm going to get rid of that national insurance rise. How are those things going to work together?
As we were discussing earlier, she's just been elected by the Tory faithful, the party activists who had that vote, on a low-tax, small state agenda, and here she is basically doubling government borrowing at a stroke in the next financial year. A huge intervention, as big at least as the furlough scheme, in which millions of workers were paid to stay at home. And yet, Mercy, no one really knows the cost of this. Anyone who says they do know the cost of it isn't being truthful, because the cost of it depends on what happens to wholesale energy prices in the next year. It may be that wholesale energy prices come down, so it doesn't cost much at all. Or it may be that they spiral off, depending on the geopolitics, depending on the war in Ukraine, depending on the Chinese, the Saudis, the Qataris, the Americans, whether they're going to send lots of liquefied natural gas to Europe. This is big picture geopolitics, but we're feeling it, on our fridges and our freezers and our bathroom lights.
It's so interesting, isn't it, Liam? Now, you're tapped in very much to the business world and the business community. What I'm thinking when I'm listening to you talk then is we're talking about uncertainty.
Big time.
And the business community do not like uncertainty. Will what she says today have a positive or a negative impact?
It will definitely have a positive impact on the business community, Bev, but, it's about time. For weeks and months, I've been saying on GB News, interviewing small business leaders,
they need
people, the kind of people that keep Britain running, the kind of people who run pubs, restaurants, cab firms, laundrettes, small manufacturers, high street shops, independent shops. These are the lifeblood of the British economy, and there's been no help for them with their business bills at all. And here's the thing, they are now going to get some help. Only in the last couple of days has the government said, oh yeah, and business too. But a lot of businesses, and indeed a lot of households, not knowing what was going to happen because of this Tory leadership contest going on for 2 months, they have locked themselves in at higher rates, right, with the energy companies. Now, if I was a minister, it can only be a matter of time, surely. If I was a minister, a big thing I would be focused on is saying to the energy companies, OK, we're going to stand behind these loans, but you are going to let householders, businesses, exit from those deals at higher prices with no exit penalties whatsoever. I'm not sure that's going to happen, but it should.
So from the should-be PM to the actual PM now.
The PM, she's about to speak, I believe. That is Sir Lindsay Hoyle, who's still speaking. But we are expecting Liz Truss imminently to begin speaking. You want to make a very final point?
Just while we're about to see her stand up, and here she
Sorry,
is.
the Prime Minister. There you go.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move the motion. Earlier this week...
Prime Minister, just 1 second. We've started a bit. I don't want any more from that particular bench. If we do, I go and get that cup of tea early. Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move the motion. Earlier this week, I promised I would deal with the soaring energy prices faced by families and businesses across the UK. And today I am delivering on that promise. This government is moving immediately to introduce a new energy price guarantee that will give people certainty on energy bills. It will curb inflation and boost growth. This guarantee, which includes a temporary suspension of green levies, means that from the 1st of October, a typical household will pay no more than £2,500 per year for each of the next 2 years while we get the energy market back on track. This will save a typical household £1,000 a year. It comes in addition to the £400 energy bill support scheme. This guarantee supersedes the Ofgem price cap and has been agreed with energy retailers. We will deliver this. Mr. Speaker, I will make way in a few minutes when I have made some progress. Mr. Speaker, we will deliver this by securing the wholesale price for energy while putting in place long-term measures to secure future supplies at more affordable rates. We are supporting this country through this winter and next, and tackling the root causes of high prices so we are never in the same position again. For those using heating oil, living in park homes, or those on heat networks, we will set up a fund so that all
Prime Minister, sorry about this. Can I just say, I don't want a running commentary from here and giving me the advice. I certainly don't need it. Prime Minister, I don't want to interrupt you. It's up to you to give way when you feel it's appropriate. But just to let you know that it is now being printed, the WMS, and I'm hoping that we'll bring it into the chamber for everybody to see. Prime Minister.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. For those using heating oil, living in park homes, or those on heat networks, we will set up a fund so that all UK consumers can benefit from equivalent support. I'll give way to the honourable gentleman.
I thank her for giving way. National Energy Action estimate with the cap at the current level there's 6.5 million households in fuel poverty. So raising the cap to £2,500, how many more millions of people will end up in fuel poverty, does she reckon?
Well, Mr. Speaker, we are taking action to help people on the lowest incomes through universal credit, and we are also supplying £400 through the energy bills support scheme. Mr. Speaker, I would like to make some progress and then I will take more interventions. We will also support all businesses, charities and public sector organisations with their energy costs this winter, offering an equivalent guarantee for 6 months. After those 6 months, we will provide further support to vulnerable sectors such as hospitality, including our local pubs. My right honourable friend, the Business Secretary, will work with business to review where this should be targeted to make sure those most in need get support. This review will be concluded within 3 months, giving businesses certainty. In the meantime, companies with the wherewithal need to be looking for ways they can improve energy efficiency and increase direct energy generation. I will give way to my honourable friend.
I'm grateful to the Prime Minister giving way, and I commend her on the speed with which she and her new team really grip this challenge that's facing the country. And doesn't it demonstrate, Mr. Speaker, that Conservative government do not stand by while millions of people on low incomes are threatened? The measures she's taken.
Well, my honourable friend is absolutely right. I recognise that people are struggling with their energy bills, and that is why I have brought forward this debate as soon as possible to give people reassurance ahead of this winter that energy bills are going to be affordable. And we will be bringing forward emergency legislation to deliver this policy. My right honourable friend, the Chancellor of the Exchequer, will set out the expected costs as part of his fiscal statement later this month. And I can tell the House today that we will not be giving in to the Leader of the Opposition who calls for this to be funded through a windfall tax. That would undermine the national interest by discouraging the very investment we need to secure homegrown energy supplies. If the honourable members will allow me to make a bit more progress, I may be able to answer their questions before they've asked them. But, Mr. Speaker, the party opposite need to understand...
Prime Minister. Sorry, Prime Minister. A point of order, Kevin Brennan.
Copies have been made available to some members of the written ministerial statement, but there aren't enough for everybody. Is it possible, if I might finish this point of order, is it possible that sufficiently so that we can all see it?
As we both know, it's not a point of order, but it's certainly a clarification that they're now coming out, and we're printing them as fast as possible to make sure all members have the ability to read it. It is with great disappointment, but that's a matter of fact. Prime Minister. Prime Minister.
Instead of that approach, we are taking an approach which is pro-growth, pro-business, and pro the investment we need for our country's energy security. I will give way.
Very grateful to the Prime Minister. Does she agree that we are too short of energy but have plenty of taxes? And does she agree that if we had an oversupply of taxes, as the party opposite wants, we'd have less supply of the things we were taxing?
My right honourable friend makes an extremely good point. The reality is we can't tax our way to growth. And the policy I am setting out today is all about helping people with their energy costs, as I promised, and making sure that we have the long-term energy supplies that we need for our country. I'll give way to the honourable gentleman at the back.
Thank you to the Prime Minister for giving way. Just 6 months ago, households faced energy bills of £1,300. We are today being told that fixing prices at £2,500 is the best that the government can do. It's not. So why is the Prime Minister putting private energy profits ahead of people at this crucial time?
Well, what we are doing is we're doing the important work to help people and businesses get through this winter and next winter, whilst fixing Britain's long-term energy supplies. I've already given way a number of occasions. I will give way later. Please hold off for a bit longer. Mr. Speaker, this is the moment to be bold. We are facing a global energy crisis, and there are no cost-free options. There will be a cost to this intervention. I will give way.
I strongly welcome this package of bills to help government. It's a marked contrast to the meagre scrappings offered by the benches opposite. I just welcome also that she's confirmed that schools and colleges will get help with their energy bills, as the colleges face increases of 300%. And could I just finally ask her, will she continue to bear down on fuel duty? Because we know that motorists at the pumps face extortionate bills when they fill up their cars.
Well, I thank my honourable friend for his point, and I'm sure the Chancellor of the Exchequer is listening intently to his point ahead of his fiscal statement later this month. Mr. Speaker, I want to make some progress on explaining how we will defray the cost of this intervention, which I think might answer some of the honourable people's questions before they ask them. So the way we are going to defray the cost of this intervention is first of all by ramping up supply. Following on from the successful vaccine task force, we have created a new energy supply task force under the leadership of Maddie McTernan. They are already negotiating new long-term energy contracts with domestic and international gas suppliers to immediately bring down the cost of intervention. We are also accelerating all sources of domestic energy, including North Sea oil and gas production. We will be launching a new licensing round, which we expect to lead to over 100 new licenses being awarded. And we will speed up our deployment of all clean and renewable technologies, including hydrogen, solar, carbon capture and storage, and wind, where we are already a world leader in offshore generation. Renewable and nuclear generators will move on to contracts for difference to end the situation where electricity prices are set by the marginal price of gas. This will mean that generators are receiving a fair price, reflecting their cost of production, further bringing down the cost of this intervention. I will give way to my honourable friend.
I warmly welcome the immediate action announced by the Prime Minister on the cost of energy, which is really going to help families in the Pendle constituency and right across the United Kingdom. Next week in Parliament is Nuclear Week. So will she join with me in supporting the rollout of small modular reactors championed by Rolls-Royce, who have 2 sites in my constituency? We need this technology now, so will she go further and faster to drive forward the nuclear programme in this country?
Well, my honourable friend is absolutely right. Small modular reactors are a very important part of our energy mix. They're produced here in the United Kingdom. They will help boost growth as well as boost our energy security. And secondly, I will take a few more interventions in a few minutes, but please let me make progress on my speech. Secondly, today's actions will deliver substantial benefits to our economy, boosting growth, which increases tax receipts and gives certainty to business. This intervention is expected to curb inflation by up to 5 percentage points, bringing a reduction in the cost of servicing government debt. Thirdly, I'm announcing today that with the Bank of England, we will set up a new scheme worth up to 40 billion to ensure that firms operating in the wholesale energy market have the liquidity they need to manage price volatility. This will stabilise the market and decrease the likelihood that energy retailers need our support, like they did last winter. By increasing supply, boosting the economy and increasing liquidity in the market, we will significantly reduce the cost to government of this intervention. I will give way.
Very kind of the Prime Minister to give way to so many sensible members. Today is clearly a big intervention, and the government is, as she promised, wrapping its arms around my constituents, as we did during the pandemic, and looking to the future. Can she confirm that the plans are primarily about domestic supply rather than imported reliance, and therefore in line with the commitments, the important commitments that we made at COP26 in Glasgow and the path to net zero that we made in our manifesto 3 years ago?
Prime Minister.
Well, I am completely committed to net zero by 2050, and I'll be saying more about how we will be achieving that later on in this speech. Mr. Speaker, as well as dealing with the immediate situation we face, we are also dealing with the root causes. I'll give way to the honourable gentleman.
Very grateful for Prime Minister Wayne. Can I welcome her to her place and hope she will work with opposition parties in the national interest. But can she confirm that her announcement today will still see the energy bills of struggling families rising by another £500 next month, and that this winter they will be paying energy bills twice the bills that they paid last winter?
Well, we're also, at the same time as introducing the energy price guarantee, also providing families with £400 and providing extra support to the vulnerable. So vulnerable families will be receiving that extra support. But, Mr. Speaker, I want to move on to why we are in the situation we are in now. And the fact is that energy policy over the past decades has not focused enough on securing supply. There is no better. I don't know why, Mr. Speaker, I don't know why the honourable gentleman is laughing. He is partly responsible for this. Better example than nuclear, where the UK has not built a single new nuclear reactor in 25 years. And it's not just about supply. The regulatory structures have failed, exposing the problems of having a price cap applied to retail but not to the wholesale market. All of this has left us vulnerable to volatile global markets and malign actors in an increasingly geopolitical world. And that is why Putin is exploiting this situation by weaponising energy supplies as part of his illegal war on Ukraine. I'll give way to the honourable gentleman.
Would she accept that with 150 years' worth of gas under the ground in GB, it is absolute madness to turn our back on that resource at a time when people are facing huge energy bills? And could she also just explain to us how she intends to deliver the support which she's talking about in Northern Ireland?
That's the people from Ireland.
Well, I do agree with the honourable gentleman. I'm coming to the point about shale gas in a minute. But I can assure him that this policy will apply in Northern Ireland, and those benefits will be open to the people of Northern Ireland as part of the United Kingdom. So, as well as the action that I am announcing today, we will use these 2 years ahead of us to make sure that the United Kingdom is never in this situation again. Launching 2 reviews. Firstly, a review of energy regulation to fix the underlying problems. We want a new approach which will address supply and affordability for the long term. Secondly, we will conduct a review to ensure we deliver net zero by 2050 in a way that is pro-business and pro-growth. And this review will be led by my right honourable friend, the member for Kingswood. I will give way to
Can I firstly, on behalf of the people of South Leicestershire, welcome my right honourable friend to her role. She mentions Putin. Whilst the measures that she's announcing today are incredibly welcome for my constituents and all our constituents to protect, and particularly the poorest and most vulnerable in society, will she give an assurance today that her government will continue to stand firm against the appalling and brutal actions of Putin and his thuggish regime? And will she tell the British people honestly that we are in for a difficult winter, notwithstanding the challenges that face us?
Well, my honourable friend is right. The reason we are in this difficult situation is because of Putin's appalling war in Ukraine. But we do need to make sure that our energy supplies are more resilient and more secure, so we are never in this situation again, and we cannot be subject to global energy prices and the actions of dictators. We are delivering a stable environment that gives investors the confidence to back gas as part of our transition to net zero. It is vital that we take steps to increase our domestic energy supply. I'll make a bit more progress and then I will give way. We will end the moratorium on extracting our huge reserves of shale which could get gas flowing as soon as 6 months, where there is local support for it. We will launch Great British Nuclear later this month, putting us on a path to deliver up to a quarter of our electricity generation with nuclear by 2050. I'll give way to the Honourable Lady.
To the Prime Minister. Last September, I asked the then Business Secretary why the government signed off on the closure of the Rough gas storage facility. He dismissed it as not relevant and he accused me of stoking panic and alarm. Given the government are now reportedly reopening that facility, it doesn't suggest the new Chancellor is a man of foresight and strategy, does it, Prime Minister?
We are in a very, very difficult situation, and I am committed as Prime Minister to doing everything it takes to resolve this situation, to help people with their energy bills, and to make sure we have security of supply for the long term. I've already taken a lot of interventions. I need to make progress on this speech. As a result of these steps on shale and on nuclear and the acceleration of renewables, I am today setting a new ambition for our country. Far from being dependent on the global energy market and the actions of malign actors, we will make sure that the UK is a net energy exporter by 2040. And my right honourable friend, the Business Secretary, will set out a plan in the next 2 months to make sure we achieve this. Mr. Speaker, I know that businesses and families are very concerned about how they will get through this winter. That is why I felt it was important to act urgently to provide immediate help and support, as well as setting out our plan about how we are going to secure the UK's future energy supplies. This is part of my vision for rebuilding our economy. Secure energy supply is vital to growth and prosperity, yet it has been ignored for too long. I will end the UK's short-termist approach to energy security and supply once and for all. That is what I promised on the steps of Downing Street. Today, we are acting decisively on that pledge. This will help us build a stronger, more resilient and more secure United Kingdom. I commend this motion to the House.
There's a lot of members who wish to get in, so think of others after we've got through the front benches. I now come to the Leader of the Opposition, Keir Starmer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and can I thank the Prime Minister for advance sight of our opening speech. We're in the middle of a national emergency. People are really scared, and families don't know if they can warm their homes this winter, and businesses ask if they can keep the lights on. That is why the Labour Party spent the summer fighting for a price freeze, so that no household would pay a penny more on their bills. When we called for it, many people said we were wrong. They pretended that this crisis was something that just affected the poorest, as if working families on average wages could easily shoulder astronomical bills. They dismissed our call for support as handouts. But those objections could never last. The Prime Minister had no choice. No government can stand by while millions of families fall into poverty, whilst businesses shut their doors and the economy falls to ruin. So I am pleased there is action today, and that the principle of a price limit has been accepted. But under our plan, not a penny more on bills. Under this plan, a price rise. But this support, I'll just make some progress and then I will. But this support does not come cheap. And the real question before the House today, the real question the government faces, the political question, is who is going to pay? The Treasury estimates that energy producers could make £170 billion in unexpected windfall profits over the next 2 years. I repeat that, £170 billion in unexpected windfall profits over the next 2 years. I will give way in just a moment. The head of BP has called this crisis a cash machine for his company. And households are on the other end of that cash machine, their bills funding these eye-watering profits. That's why we've been calling for a windfall tax since January. And it's why we want to see the windfall tax expanded now. But the Prime Minister is opposed to windfall taxes. She wants to leave these vast profits on the table with one clear and obvious consequence: the bill will be picked up by working people. She claims that a windfall tax will deter investment. That's ridiculous. These vast profits are not the reward of careful planning. They are the unexpected windfall from Putin's barbarity in Ukraine. There is no reason why taxing them would affect investment in the future. Don't just take my word for it. Asked which investment BP would cancel if there was a windfall tax, the chief executive said none. None. His words, not mine. So the Prime Minister's only argument against the windfall tax falls apart at first inspection, laying bare that she's simply driven by dogma, and it's working people that will pay for that dogma. I will give way.
Does he accept that this government has already introduced a windfall tax, and energy companies today are paying 65% on their profits? What would he rather see that tax set at?
We're happy if it was 100%. What's 100%?
We're talking about what happens this winter and next. And if he doesn't understand, I'll tell him something. Every pound the Prime Minister's government refuses to raise in windfall taxes, which is leaving billions on the table, is an extra pound of borrowing. That's the simple, straightforward argument. Every pound she leaves on the table is an extra pound of borrowing, loading the burden of the cost of living crisis onto working people who will have to pay back for years to come.
Will my right honourable friend?
I will.
I'm grateful to my right honourable friend. The Prime Minister has been careful to frame her guarantee in terms of her refusal to tax. But is she not going to have a problem explaining to the British people how a levy on their bills in the future to repay the borrowing is not actually a tax?
I'm grateful for that intervention. This is the basic political divide. They want to protect the excess profits of the oil and gas and energy group, the excess profits. We want to protect working people. Mr. Speaker, I will give way.
I'm very grateful to him for giving way, and this Saturday myself and many members of the Chesterfield Labour Party will be out meeting voters in Chesterfield, and if any of them haven't been paying attention this week, they might still say you're all the same. But isn't it absolutely clear now that there is a clear divide? Every voter that I knock on the door, they will know political parties have a choice. They've chosen to be on the side of the energy generators. We've chosen to be on the side of bill payers.
Well, I'm grateful for that, and I'll be absolutely amazed if members opposite haven't picked this up. Ask voters whether they think that it's fair that they pick up the bill, or those companies that made profits they didn't expect to make, and there's only one answer to that question. It's a very simple question of whose side are you on? And I'm afraid this isn't a one-off, because not only is the Prime Minister refusing to extend the windfall tax, she is also choosing to cut corporation tax. An extra £17 billion in tax cuts for companies that are already doing well. That means handing a tax cut to the water companies polluting our beaches, handing tax cuts to the banks, handing a tax cut to Amazon. She's making that choice, even though households and public services need every penny they can get. Working people are paying for the cost of living crisis. Stroke victims wait an hour for an ambulance, and criminals walk the streets with impunity. It's the wrong choice for working people. It's the wrong choice for Britain. I will give way.
I thank my right honourable friend, and it seems that the government has decided to deal with this energy crisis off the backs of ordinary, hard-working Brits and load huge levels of debt on future generations rather than properly taxing the billions of pounds of excess profits for energy companies. Why is this government on the side of big corporates rather than being on the side of ordinary, hard-working Brits? Is it because the Prime Minister is a former employee of Shell and is therefore on the side of oil and gas companies and is not protecting ordinary working British people?
Well, I'm grateful for that intervention, and it does come down to this basic point. Everybody in this House recognises that profits are needed for investment in all businesses. But in this case, these are unexpected profits that we're not expected to make. And when the chief executive of BP says this will not deter any investment, it's a bit rich for the opposite to say he's completely wrong. He is the chief executive of BP. He's made his case. It's the complete opposite of the case that the Prime Minister is trying to make. Now, Mr. Speaker, the immediate cause of, I will in a moment, the immediate cause of this energy crisis is Putin's grotesque invasion of Ukraine. We stand united in our support for Ukraine. If we're to defend democracy, defeat imperialism, and preserve security on the continent, Putin's aggression must fail. And whatever our political differences, the Prime Minister will always have my full support in that common endeavour. But we must ask ourselves, why are we so exposed to changes in the international price of oil and gas? Why are we so at the mercy of dictators, able to pull the plug on wells and shut down pipelines? Why is there such a fundamental flaw in our national security? I will give way in just a moment. I'll make my argument, then I will give way. It's about a failure to prepare, a failure to increase our energy independence, a failure to rapidly decrease our reliance on fossil fuels. They banned, Mr. Speaker, they banned onshore wind in 2015. That cost us clean energy capacity equivalent to all our Russian gas imports in recent years. A policy disaster. The Prime Minister has been constantly opposed to solar power, the cheapest form of energy that we have. And she's been consistently wrong. And it's not just what the Prime Minister said in the heat of her leadership campaign this summer. When she was Environment Secretary, the government slashed solar subsidies. The market crashed. I will give way.
To the right honourable gentleman, but the Leader of the Opposition is being completely misleading, if I may say so, because what he said, it's under this government that the United Kingdom has the second highest offshore wind generation capacity anywhere in the world. And how is that created? It's through investment by companies. This government will allow for that to happen.
Well, I take it from that intervention that he doesn't quarrel with me that the ban on onshore wind since 2015 has been a policy disaster, along with the opposition to solar power. Forgive me, I saw the former Prime Minister raising it. I will take her intervention, of course.
Thank you. I'm grateful to the right honourable gentleman for giving way. He's talking about lack of preparation for energy security for the United Kingdom. In that case, if Labour is so worried about lack of preparation, why did they not build any new nuclear capacity?
Mr. Speaker, I'm grateful for that intervention. Let me deal with it in full, because it's a very important point, because nuclear is vital to our future and a new generation of power plants should have been built by now. Yesterday, the Prime Minister tried desperately to blame Labour, and that intervention goes to this point. I remember the exchange across this dispatch box in 2006 in which Prime Minister Blair said, "I'm pro-nuclear." And the Leader of the Opposition, David Cameron, didn't know where to look. If you haven't seen the clip, have a look. I'm pro-nuclear. David Cameron didn't know where to look. The uncomfortable truth for members opposite is this. The last Labour government gave the go-ahead for new nuclear sites in 2009. In the 13 long years since then, not one has been completed. Let me turn to home insulation, which I will give way.
Tony Blair may have said he was pro-nuclear, but he didn't actually build any nuclear power stations. Let me ask him about the windfall tax. The £170 billion he talks about, from my understanding, most of that is not profits of UK companies. It's energy supplied to the United Kingdom, but it's not within our ability to tax it. And secondly, we already have a windfall tax. We're already taxing those profits at 65%. How high does he want a windfall tax to go?
On the question of 2006, I think I'll give way to him again. What was his party's position in 2006 when David Cameron was asked the question on nuclear? Because he didn't have a position on it. But on the 170 billion that he raises, I think he's wrong about that. But if there is any doubt, I'd invite the Treasury to disclose the documents about this so that we can all see them and evaluate them. Because I think I'm right and I think he's wrong. But if the documents could be made available, we can all look at that £170 billion. Mr. Speaker, I will give way.
But isn't the bigger point that there's a simple choice about how you pay for it? It either all goes on borrowing and ordinary families and on the never never for this country, or at least some of it is charged in a windfall tax on unearned and unexpected income, which Putin has basically put into the pockets of Shell and BP. That's the fundamental choice, isn't it?
That is the fundamental choice. It's the fundamental divide in this House. Let them defend their position to protect those excess profits, and we will defend our position of standing up for working people. I'm going to make some progress. Mr. Speaker, I've taken a lot of intervention. I'm going to make some progress. Let me turn to home insulation, which reduces energy consumption like nothing else. We have the draftiest homes in Europe. The last Labour government set about fixing that. Then the party opposite said, cut the green crap, and the whole project all but collapsed. Installation rates down by 92%. Utterly short-sighted, and it's costing millions of households £1,000 a year on their energy bills right now. No interventions now. The Prime Minister is right to recognise that immediate support needs to be combined with longer-term action. But I'm afraid fracking and a dash for gas in the North Sea will not cut bills, nor strengthen our energy security, but they will drive a coach and horses through our efforts to fight the looming climate crisis. She should listen to her own Chancellor sitting next to her. What did the Chancellor have to say about this just a few months ago? Now, this is quite a long quote. See the Chancellor leaning forward. I've tried to cut it down. But every sentence is worth repeating of what the Chancellor said just a few months ago, his words. For those calling for its return, they misunderstand the situation we find ourselves in. If we lifted the fracking moratorium, it would take up to a decade to extract sufficient volumes, and it would come at a high price for communities and our precious countryside, his words. I'll go on because this is so good. Second, he said just a few months ago, no amount of shale gas from hundreds of wells dotted across rural England would be enough to lower the European price anytime soon. And he went on. And with the best will in the world, private companies are not going to sell shale gas they produce to UK consumers below the market price. They are not charities. Spot on, Chancellor. And what did the Chancellor at the same time have to say about North Sea gas? additional North Sea production won't materially affect the wholesale price. Indeed, earlier this year, his previous department helpfully put out a series of Mythbusters, a government myth-busting document. Here's one of them. Chancellor, your document. Myth. Extracting more North Sea gas lowers prices. Answer. Fact. UK production isn't large enough to materially impact on the global price of gas. I've got a copy for the Prime Minister. We do need to carefully manage our existing resources in the North Sea. And the industry has an important role to play in our future as we transition to a different form of energy. But doubling down on fossil fuels is a ludicrous answer to a fossil fuel crisis. And if all countries took the approach advocated by her new Energy Secretary of squeezing every single drop out of their fossil fuel reserves, global temperatures will rise by a catastrophic 3 degrees. That will be devastating for our planet and future generations. And it's totally unnecessary. Now I'm going to make some progress because I do think other speakers need to get in. New wind and solar power are now 9 times cheaper than gas. 9 times cheaper. So we need a clean energy sprint, urgently accelerating the rollout of offshore wind, onshore wind, solar, nuclear, hydrogen and tidal. And last year I set out a new national mission to insulate 19 million homes and cut bills for good. If the government had taken me up on that challenge, 2 million homes would already be insulated this winter. Britain needs a fresh start. We need a government that will never leave working people to pick up the tab for excess profits of the energy industry. We need a government that plans for the long term, rather than leaving us badly exposed to the whims of dictators. And we need a government that will drive us forward to energy independence, rather than doubling down on fossil fuels. The change we need is not the 4th Tory Prime Minister in 6 years, it's a Labour government. Thank you.
Theresa May.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I refer the House to my entry in the Members' Register. Can I first of all congratulate my right honourable friend on acting so swiftly to bring forward a package of support for people with their energy bills. There's no doubt, as every member of this House knows, that this is a matter of real concern for people in my constituency and every other constituency who've been concerned about how they're going to heat their homes, and indeed businesses worried about how they can continue to run their businesses. May I also welcome the fact that my right honourable friend has coupled action on energy bills with action on energy security. The vicious further invasion of Ukraine by Russia has indeed shown the necessity of us having our own energy security, although it makes sense anyway. We have made important progress in this over recent years. I refer, of course, to the investment in Hinkley Point C, and I again welcome the commitment that my right honourable friend and the government have made to continuing that commitment to support nuclear energy. And as I pointed out in my intervention, just wait a second. It's more than 1 second, but anyway. As I pointed out in my intervention to the Right Honourable Leader of the Opposition, and was emphasised by the excellent intervention by my Right Honourable friend, the member for Forest of Dean, in 13 years of government, whatever the then Leader of the Labour Party might have said, they did not build any new capability. I'll give way to
I thank her for giving way. On Hinkley Point C, it's going to be at least 4 years late, possibly 5 years late. It's nearly 50% over budget, and EDF have got an eye-water and 35-year contract for a strike rate at £92.50 per megawatt, compared to roughly £40 per megawatt for just 15 years in onshore and offshore wind. She should have scrapped Hinkley Point C when she had the chance, shouldn't she?
Can I say to the honourable gentleman that it's high time that Scottish nationalists actually came up with some practical solutions to these issues, rather than rejecting everything that the government says. I give forward to the leaders.
I'm very grateful to the former Prime Minister. You know, we're all trying to find energy security. Can I say to her and say to the government front bench, what we should be doing is prioritising tidal. There's an excellent Royal Society report from last year that indicates we can get to 11.5 gigawatts. I'm asking the government to enhance the ring-fence pot from 20 to 50 million. You'll get the baseload you need, and you won't need nuclear energy.
say to the right honourable gentleman, this is actually a rather...
Hello and welcome. The time is 12:25. You are watching GB News Day with Gloria De Piero and Mark Longhurst.
And we've still got there the House of Commons discussing and debating this statement from Prime Minister Liz Truss, having unveiled those plans to tackle the energy crisis. Let's just remind you, it's a £2,500 cap, and that's from the 1st of October, likely to last for 2 years, saving Liz Truss said about £1,000 per household per year.
But we don't know how it's going to be paid for yet, how much it's even going to cost. Our political editor, Darren McCaffrey, is in Westminster for us. Darren?
Well, we'll try and make contact with him. Let's just actually, underline, Darren, as we were saying, Sir Keir Starmer asking that very question. Who is going to pay for this? That is the political divide between the two sides.
Yeah, it really is indeed. First of all, we should reflect on the fact that something's happening in the chamber, that some of the senior members of government and the opposition have left the chamber in the last couple of minutes during that statement. Pretty unusual. We're not entirely sure. In fact, we've no idea why, but we'll keep across what has happened. But clearly something is happening for those politicians to leave during what is a very, very significant statement. Let's reflect, though, on what Liz Truss, the Prime Minister, had to say in that statement. A massive intervention from the government. We're going to get that new price energy guarantee from the 1st of October, when we're expecting, of course, that price cap to increase. It's not going to remain at £2,500. The government argue it is going to save around £1,000 per year for the next 2 years, so effectively taking us up to the next general election. Is going to be an incredibly expensive policy, though the government are unwilling to put any figures on it at the moment. It's going to be tens of billions of pounds, if not over £100 billion worth of intervention. Of course, it all really does depend, though, on the energy markets themselves and how much those prices fluctuate. But at the moment, it is a big, big intervention. The government cannot, until there is an actual budget, put a forecast or a price on. Now, that is in relation to households, Mark. When it comes to businesses, because it's an entirely different market, the details aren't quite as clear. There is a scheme, we're told, in progress. It's going to last for not quite as long, for more likely 6 months, but that the government argue it will be a pretty robust kind of move by them to also help businesses. And at the same time, on top of all of this cap, the government are going to ensure that some of the measures that were announced earlier on in the spring by the former Chancellor Rishi Sunak, such as that universal payment of £400 and an extra £150 for those on lower incomes, will remain in place. And we also heard that the government is going to introduce get rid of the green levy, I should say. That's been suspended. Heating oil homes will have equivalent support, so if you don't necessarily rely on gas. And that also there will be help for Northern Ireland, because this scheme only applies to Great Britain. There will be an equivalent scheme introduced in Northern Ireland, again complicated by devolution and by the fact that they've got a different energy market. In terms of where the opposition come from all of this, clearly they welcome this intervention. However, they've got several points. First of all, who is paying for this? They want to see some of those big corporations like Shell, BP and others that have made enormous profits, unexpected profits in the last couple of months, and are expected to do so for the next couple of years, pick up more of the bill. That would be a windfall tax, something Liz Truss has argued she is not willing to do because she thinks it will stifle growth and investment. Second of all, they want to see actually lots more investment in green energy. Their argument is that that's pretty cheap at the moment. It's pretty easy to do, wind energy, solar energy. The government needs to get on and do